Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this episode, we are looking at the way organizations are planning for the future of legacy solutions and how they can take real measure of when to invest in cloud migration and modernization. My guests for this discussion are Velosio's Carolyn Norton, Practice Director for Cloud Services, and Cloud Solutions Specialist Brian Williams. Velosio is the sponsor of this episode, and we begin by exploring why decisions around legacy systems may feel more urgent now than in the past. As some risks increase in terms of security and sustainability, organizations are updating their modernization plans to focus on the most pressing needs, Carolyn and Brian explain. We also discuss how Microsoft's cloud and AI strategy is changing buyer expectations and how that in turn is changing their assessment of the value of legacy systems. Some of the factors they're talking to customers about at Velosio today go beyond security into the latest governance demands and the impact of their investments on cyber insurance. And my guests offer some perspective on the importance of business outcomes and the way they believe executives should be helping to champion and prioritize the most important modernization efforts. All right, well, I want to welcome my guests for today's conversation, Carolyn Norton and Brian Williams. Thank you so much for being here. Could we maybe have a bit of an introduction for our listeners? Carolyn, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. My name is Carolyn Norton. I'm the Cloud Practice Director here at Velosio.
Yeah, and this is Brian Williams. I'm a Cloud Solutions Specialist here at Velosio too.
All right, well, I appreciate having both of you here for today's conversation. And when we were planning today's event, the topic of legacy came up, and I thought maybe that would be a great place to start as it relates to today's cloud solutions and what more modern solutions are really about. In today's landscape, what criteria would you use to define what legacy solutions mean for organizations?
Well, Jason, legacy, I just wanted to touch on that word for a second because that word really sets the tone for the entire conversation. When we say legacy, we're not just talking about on-prem systems anymore. You can also consider legacy as legacy cloud. These are environments that either have made it to Azure, they're still on-prem, but essentially that's it. They've stopped right there. These applications, these systems have not been redesigned. The data is disconnected. The process is usually, heavily manual. They're running, but they've not really evolved and they haven't been built to evolve. So when we're talking about legacy, we're talking about a scenario where it's limiting your ability to move quickly, access data reliably, improve how work gets done, etc. So when you ask the question, what are the things that you want to look out for in terms of defining, what a legacy system is, those are key traits that you're looking for so that you understand that there's a potential there to move it forward and evolve.
And I would add on to this too. I would also consider legacy like end of support cliffs, like older database applications, Windows Server, Dynamics, those things that Microsoft is having these certain legacy applications that customers are looking for ways to potentially hopefully move those up in the cloud. So end of support really comes to mind when you're think of legacy applications or systems.
All right, great. Yeah, good maybe baseline for the rest of today's topics here. So what are some of the signs that a legacy system may be facing increasing risks when it comes to security or sustainability? And I think maybe we touched on some of those qualities already, but could we dive into them a little more?
The biggest signal I look for is time and consistency. If the team is spending hours pulling reports, preparing for meetings, reconciling data, your system's not working efficiently and it's not doing enough for you. You start to see that gaps are in the system. There's either consistency issues, processes that are lacking, and a lot of it is adding more burden to the organization. Sure, it's running, but it's doing it at a high overhead. Data inconsistency, governance, security, and how it's protecting the overarching data that supports the system. All these little cracks in the foundation, as we like to say, affect the structure of this application and the system. And those are really telling signs that you're heading in a direction that ideally you don't want to be in, right? You want to have a strong foundation. You want to have a system that doesn't have all these cracks that, seemingly some of the ones that I noted earlier are small, but can expand and create bigger problems.
And I would add on to that, sustainability is also about people. Think about legacy systems concentrate knowledge only in a few employees. So when they leave, the risk becomes even more. So, and because people are not training those legacy systems anymore. So I would say that is a huge area we're seeing is a lot of new hires come in. They have no idea about these legacy systems and how to use them.
One conversation that came up recently that this reminds me of is, at least on the user side of things for a legacy system, that someone coming into a scenario or an environment where people are using the systems might notice sort of big hurdles or inefficiencies in the way users are working that they've been doing maybe for a long time and almost don't even notice anymore that a more modern system would address. And it's sort of been baked into the culture or baked into the workflows. And it almost seems like users can lose perspective in certain cases of what systems should be doing for them, as opposed to how they're sort of serving the older, more inefficient situations that they've sort of come to deal with.
And it also makes it hard for them to navigate when something new gets introduced, whether it's a new ask of the business or a process that needs to be introduced. And all of a sudden you find that your current system can't navigate and pivot as easily. That can be very challenging as well. Those are signs that, maybe the system is not as nimble as you would like.
What about on the sort of the IT side for this topic? Do you find that sort of IT departments are then also sort of doing additional legwork or spending additional time researching or making sure that they've done enough to support some of these systems that are aging?
Yes, typically there is. It actually can be a yes and no answer. So it could be that IT is not doing much because it is, I don't want to say static because it's not entirely static, but it really isn't changing that much. It's just think of a box that you put in the corner and it's doing what it's supposed to do, but it's not doing much more beyond that. So sometimes it's left alone to its devices. Again, maybe there is something going on and you're not really having to pay attention to it because it's not breaking, it's not faulting, it's doing what it's supposed to do, albeit it could be inefficient, insecure, or otherwise. So there might be scenarios where IT is perfectly fine and they don't have overhead. That is very much possible in a legacy environment. Then you have the adverse, the other side of the picture, which is, as things are constantly modernizing and changing and the system is being impacted, as things are moving forward, the operating system is enhancing, the database that runs the system or the data element is being updated and changed. Security concerns that are coming out there that attack and penetrate older solutions versus newer solutions. All of that start to expose itself. And there's a lot of fire drill blocking and tackling that has to happen where IT may have more tax on a legacy environment than perhaps a modern environment. So I have seen it be both, where it can be either or. And unfortunately, even for the systems that you're not really caring for, that's kind of like, I think of it like a gas leak. It's really bad. It's not good if it's out there. It's hard to tell that there's going to be an issue. But boy, when there's an issue, it presents itself large and fast. So while there's not a lot of overhead for IT, it can present itself into a massive issue. Conversely, then you have the day-to-day stuff where you're just constantly trying to make sure that the solution is running and doing what it's supposed to be doing. And it's so much overhead just to keep things status quo and not modernizing and evolving. So there's pain points on either side. It's just one's a lot later and volatile, and the other one is consistent and persistent.
A lot of the IT or people who are operating these applications, what we see sometimes is they'll say, oh, it still works, but what people don't say until the day it doesn't, then your options are you're looking at, I call it an emergency priced solution because you got to act fast. So that's where we're trying to help clients. Don't wait till the end of support or end of patches. You should be preparing that before that time comes.
Yeah, it works until it works until it doesn't. And what's your strategy at that point when that moment does hit? Yeah, and when people do, or when organizations do sort of make a decision that they're planning a migration, that they're going to modernize, they obviously have different options, ways to approach it, choices to make. What are some of the ways you help guide a team at that kind of a moment in their decision process?
I think we simplified into like 3 motions: fortify, bridge, and transform. Fortify is about getting control of your environment, ensuring security, identity, governance, and visibility are where they need to be at. Bridge is about proving how things work today without rebuilding everything, like connecting systems, improving your data flow, and reducing manual effort. And then transform is where you rethink the experience, like modern applications, better user experiences, and more connected platforms.
Yeah, and a lot of it is understanding in what state your system is in. Typically, time is a key factor. If your system is near death, aging, we got to do something drastic, right? We need to understand how to make sure that you're able to still run your business and what does that ultimately look like. And then there are scenarios where your system is, again, it's running, but it could benefit from something encapsulating it, fortifying it and making it better, which is where Fortify comes into the mix, right? So we're not saying that the system needs to stay as is, but for Fortify, you're giving more time by protecting and adding some layers on your system so that it has some layer of insulation, if I had to pick a word, so that it has a little bit more of a runway. And then Bridge is in the middle. So it's usually where clients, they want to modernize, but for whatever reason, it could be time inside the organization. It could be budget. It could be people time or training time. There's usually something in there that doesn't allow them to either protect and or transform, which are two vastly opposite ends of the spectrum. So Bridge is an opportunity for us to start going in the journey of modernization without introducing a lot of changes. So it feels more natural and comfortable, and it's done through phasing. So that way it gets you to your end game, not as quickly as a transform, but not as long tail as a Fortify. So it really depends on where the organization's at, what their pain points are, how much time do they have, the people element, and making sure that we're thinking about it in the right way that makes sense for the organization, because it's not usually just one answer.
Given how fast Microsoft is changing its cloud and AI strategy, how do you see buyers sort of adapting their outlook in response?
We're seeing a shift in expectations. On my conversations I have with a lot of our C-levels today, everyone's trying to figure out, how do I get data quicker? How do I optimize? How do I become more productive with my own internal departments? So there's all these AI solutions out there. And I think they're looking at partners like us to really guide them into that next evolution.
What I've also learned, Brian, when we interact with clients is a lot of problems are very similar, whether it's industry or what an organization is focused on. And there's a lot of, I don't know what I don't know. That comes up quite a bit. And so something that Brian does a really good job of and the organization does a really good job of is listening and understanding. Because we have a sense of what could potentially be the right solution and the right fit. And it may not be technology. It could be, a process or enablement or some mix of all three. But really understanding, with everything that's happening, how does it impact you? Does it matter? Because there could be things in the market that doesn't affect you at all. AI is a big one. Everyone keeps talking about AI. Not every organization is ready for AI just yet. But that doesn't mean to say that these conversations can't be in the guise of, let's get you prepared. Let's get you in that journey so that when it makes sense and when you're starting to think about, or there's a potential solution that it can help problem solve for your organization, you're not starting from scratch. Right. And that's what a lot of modernization and cloud is really meant to be, is it's nimble enough to understand where it fits, where it makes sense, and using it to its fullest and its advantage, but doing it in a way that makes sense for the organization. Because one big change may be necessary. And then sometimes it's a journey and a process and it's a phased approach with multiple different things that are influencing the solution at hand.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine customers have always asked your team tough questions when it comes to making new investments. That's certainly nothing new. But when you're talking about legacy systems and sort of the understanding that organizations have about the costs and sort of what they already own versus what they might be going to, there must be really a lot of scrutiny today, maybe even more than in sort of past years where the cloud story was very different.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, I agree with that. I think the cloud story was different back then because I think everyone was trying to move out of their own data centers up in the cloud and just do a complete lift and shift. Now I think it's more around if I move my legacy applications up in the cloud, AI becomes in play even more efficient because you have all this data up in the cloud. How do I analyze? How do I use that data? How do I interact? How can I compete with other competitors out there? So it is important that the quicker you're planning to move a lot of those legacy applications up in the cloud, the more that's going to help you be more efficient with AI. That is kind of I would say, the support after that data is up in the cloud.
And the interesting part too is, again, the narrative has changed quite a bit, whereas in before it's go all cloud. And that was a utopic idea, not necessarily something that works for everyone. So in recent years, it's been amazing to see a lot of, cloud down is what I affectionately call it, right? These are cloud solutions and toolings, not everything, but they keep adding to it more items that is cloud based, but brought down to whatever it is, whatever that system is on premise or in a data center, or maybe in another facility, another SaaS solution, whatever the case may be. It's meant to be more interoperable now. So if there is an opportunity to, let's say there's a budget constraint. And again, I talk about phased approach. Maybe moving directly into the cloud is the long-term goal. But in the meantime, there's something that we can bring cloud down. Maybe there's a mix of the two. Maybe there are certain solution types. Maybe like production can go in one spot. Q&A can go somewhere else. Maybe I worry about my data, not necessarily the application itself, because maybe I want more insights. Maybe I want better reporting. Maybe I want to gain some trends that, today are very hard for me to put together. So maybe I move just the data, but the application stays where it is. So it's really cool because I think right now more than ever, it's scary because it can be a little bit of a Cheesecake Factory menu where there's so many options that you're almost like analysis paralysis. I don't know what to do here. But I feel like there's an opportunity there depending on what an organization has. What is your time to value? What is your ROI objective? What is your budget? What metric are we trying to get to? What problem are we trying to solve? And having that dialogue to really understand what an organization is looking for. And also something that we like to do, a favorite part of our conversation is like, maybe something that you don't know, something that you haven't been thinking about that we can inspire you as an organization to think more broadly, whether it's industry or process or application or just cloud solutions in general. That can be food for thought for, ooh, wow. And that's a lot of it too, is you don't know what to envision because you don't have that baseline, that picture to start off with. And so it's really cool to be able to, the outline can be colored in with the potential of cloud. The metrics and the criteria is very helpful, but it's also, talking about what the potential is and making it less abstract.
Well, let's talk about, I guess, a related topic, which I'm sure must come up in almost every conversation you have: security, governance, the impact on cyber insurance, for example, when you're doing cloud planning. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, there isn't a day that doesn't come by with, hey, I have an audit that needs to be filled out. Those have become more commonplace than it used to be. And bad actors will continue to find ways in. And sometimes it's not even bad actors. It's just making sure that you as an organization are thinking more thoughtfully. Do you have a plan? Do you have redundancy and resiliency built in? If another event in the world happens, how are you placed to navigate that? If the way your organization is structured faces X, how can you best navigate that to make sure that you're able to, as close to as business as usual as possible, you can align to. And, we find that a lot of times not just from a cybersecurity and security governance perspective, although that's very important. A lot of organizations and a lot of SLT leaders are trying to understand that. Where are the gotchas? Where could I potentially have a scenario where, my business is impacted and I'm not able to run the day to day? That comes up a lot.
Things I will add on to that too is, you think about back then security and governance were like layered as kind of an afterthought a little bit. I mean, with cyber insurance. Now, if these organizations are being evaluated just not based on actual controls, but all their identity, who's accessing it from a governance standpoint, what Carolyn was saying. So there's a direct impact risk exposure. So Cloud Plan is no longer just about performance and costs, as account for security and compliance from the start. And, especially when you're implementing AI into these areas, this is going to be even more important down the road is, do you have the security and governance that when people are accessing or prompting data, do they have the right controls to access that appropriate information? So more and more, I will say security is going to be even more important because AI is going to be a huge factor with how all your employees are trying to receive data quicker, but are they getting that information back that they're allowed to be appropriately given back to, such as like if they ask for certain payment structures within their organization or how they get paid, are they prompted back information that's only applied to them and not everyone else in their organization? So that will be very important, especially around governance and cybersecurity and how these insurance companies are evolving with these areas, not just today, but long term.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. How fast can they keep pace with some of the ideas and the initiatives in some of these organizations? And before we wrap up, I want to go back to the topic of outcomes and what leaders should expect from modernization today.
Efficiency is usually the one that comes up the most. Efficiency and quality. So there's something to be said to be able to walk through a process, and processes are incredibly important, but there's usually a lot of toll gates, decisions, factors that slow down the tax of it all. And so the efficiency of said process, whether it's transacting something, an end user themselves being able to do their day-to-day job, order fulfillment, you name it, the efficiency of it and the quality of that efficiency is super critical, because obviously we don't want to run fast and be sloppy, right? We want to be as efficient as we can be with quality in mind, meaning it's secure, it's spot checked, it's working as designed, it's in the best possible position, and the information that's flowing through is as crisp as possible so that you're getting all kinds of good information beyond it actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. So to me, it's really a efficiency and quality. That's a wonderful measurable that gets inferred but not always called out. That's a nice way to call it a win.
I agree with Carolyn there. I think the biggest thing is think about cost predictability because, when you're moving to a cloud or these software as a service applications, everything is going to a consumption based. So making sure you're optimizing your spend instead of like a CapEx surprise emergency upgrade. So, we're helping organizations such as when they're creating these resources up in Azure, do they have budget alerts out there just to make sure they're not hitting these certain thresholds, in the middle of the month? So predictability becomes very important. And think about other things too, is speed and agility. Everyone wants to have faster close cycles, faster onboarding, faster time to market for new offerings. So that's where AI gets enabled from, how can you be more productive as an individual? So instead of me creating, let's say, for example, a PowerPoint slide deck or reading up on a 10-page document, having great AI tools in place that could summarize that document, or you're prompting it to create a slide deck for your customers in a more efficient manner. That's where we're seeing these better decisions out there, hopefully for leadership, but making sure you're predictable on that cost structure long term too.
Not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. Isn't it great? Like just having things streamlined. So it's just, it leads to a lot of satisfaction across the board, right? Leadership satisfaction, workforce satisfaction. There's so much to be said.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great place to perhaps leave today's conversation. There's so much to think about for these business leaders when it comes to what their next steps are going to be. Thank you for helping us make a little more sense of it today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Carolyn and Brian for joining me today, and this message from Velosio. If you're trying to figure out your next step, Velosio encourages you to schedule a cloud modernization strategy session. It's a guided conversation to help you identify risks, reduce inefficiencies, and map out the right path forward based on where you are today. There's a link in the show notes for more information. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.